Do you know the 4 components of a speech? Oscar, be quiet. I know he knows that answer. The 4 components are the opening, the body, the conclusion. Guess what's missing? The introduction. And that's what I really want to talk to you about today. I have to admit that we as Toastmasters fail to give good introductions in most of our speeches. Most of the clubs I go to, we don't give good introductions. And good introductions are vitally important. Vitally important because you want to be good speakers and you want the audience to be engaged with you. But if you don't give them a reason to listen to you, they're going to yawn or pick up their phones. I see phones on the table. See, I have a challenge. You have a challenge. We have to beat the phones. We have to keep people engaged and interested in what we have to say. And your introduction is the very first step in getting that information. I'm going to go through step by step on how we should do our introductions. What should be in an introduction? There's a whole list of things. In fact, the next set, I'm going to have 3 sets of 3s here of things that should be in an introduction. Here's some of the things. A smooth transition. For instance, you said it, where the Toastmaster sets the tone of the meeting, right? So if you have one tone for the meeting and then you have your speaker with a different tone, you got to make some sort of transition there to smooth that all out. The second one is having the proper mindset. And I'm thinking of the time or even the tone when Sandy gave a speech about the death of her mother. So it was a serious tone. And with that serious tone, you wanted to have an introduction that also had a serious tone to kind of somber, make more somber the audience or the reception of what they were going to be hearing very shortly. And then at the same time, it's supposed to give the speaker some sort of authority. Why is this person coming up here to give this speech today? Well, I'm going to tell you, I did my homework. I did lots of research into the papers that should be, that I went through a lot of papers. Now, I'll cover them in a little bit more in a moment. But let me show you 3 more things that we should have in an introduction. Of course, these are just general things. We need to have their name and what they're going to talk about, as well as the speech title, all wrapped in. But what I didn't tell you is all of what we're trying to do within 30 seconds. And I'll go into that more in a moment too. But finally, as part of Toastmasters, we're supposed to have a pathways speech. Most of our speeches, almost all of our speeches, except for contest season, are pathways speeches. So we need to give something from pathways. And so this is our chance to say, this is from the Better Speaker Series, not Better Speaker Series, but the Presentation Mastery Level 4, how to keep an audience's attention. It's easier said than done. But what the objectives are is what I'm getting at. And as you heard just a moment ago, it has our time frame in there too. Let me see that. So you just heard my introduction, and here it is, word for word, that as Oscar read it to you. But what is hidden in there, or not hidden, it's straight out, why it's important, why this speech that I'm giving today is important to you. Well, when you do an introduction, you do the same thing. Why is it important for your audience to listen to what you have to say that day? So you want to work that in as best you can. Of course, I had the little bit about ChatGPT because I'm trying to pull this out of the humorous pathway, but it's easier said than done with this crowd. No. But you see, my time is in there, where I'm getting it from. So that you see in here, I'm able to have the essential things that are needed for an introduction. I'm going to go over a few do's and don'ts, but here's the caveat or the rub. The speaker really should be doing the introduction. The speaker should do the introduction. Got that? But if the speaker doesn't do the introduction, the Toastmaster or the introducer still needs to do the introduction. That's the problem, because sometimes the speaker doesn't do the introduction and we're still faced with doing the introduction. So it's up to both of you. So it's a matter of communications between the two of you, the Toastmaster or the introducer, if you're giving an outside speech. I got to tell you, though, I watched Aisha give a speech just last week, a week ago today, just before our meeting. And her introducer was a teacher, and she had a class. She was at Valencia College. And the teacher says, "How do you pronounce your name?" And Aisha says, "Aisha." And she says, "Take it away, Aisha." That was her introduction. That's not an introduction. But you see, it falls both on Aisha and the teacher to make a proper introduction, so those students were interested in hearing what Aisha had to say. All right, let me see. I have a couple other things to touch on. I don't want to say that, yes, the speaker's responsibilities are to be able to give background information to the introducer or the Toastmaster, typically for us. Let's say I'm going to have a handout. So the Toastmaster would want to know that, or if there's a prop needed and the Toastmaster is going to be involved with bringing up a chair or something like that. So other nuances that the introducer and the speaker themselves need to know about or communicate about. Let's put it that way. Okay, now this is really don'ts for the introducer. I had a Toastmaster, his name was John Burns. I won't mention his whole name. But John, he had this rule that if you did not give him an introduction, he would make up his own. And John would make up an outlandish introduction on anybody and everybody. So he was able to make you embarrassed in a way, but that's what we're being told not to do, is we don't upstage the speaker. So John was kind of violating the rule, or number one there and number three, because it would be a total surprise to the speaker. In fact, I remember when I was doing my research, there was one where it says, this is what the speaker said. He says, "That was such a good introduction. I can hardly wait to hear what I have to say." But we don't want to do that, do we? We want to not upstage the speaker. Of course, we don't want to reveal what the speaker is going to talk about, all their talking points. We don't want to hit them before they do. That's upstaging the speaker too. Now, don't praise the speaker's skills. I don't know if you heard this quote from Mark Twain, but Mark Twain, he went on the road and he gave many, many speeches. But what he ended up doing is he wouldn't let anyone introduce him because they would always embarrass him or overblow what Mark Twain was all about. He didn't like their efflusive, is that a word? Good. You're all baffled if that's a word. But the idea is to not overdo it. Now, another thing here, you see it, don't rely on cliches. So if I said, our next speaker is Dennis, who needs no introduction. No, that's a cliche, right? There's other ones. Without further ado, you hear that. That's just a cliche. That's almost like a verbal pause. So we want to avoid those. And I swear, I read lots of articles, and half of the articles said introduce the speaker last, say their name last. Save it for last. And the other half did not. They said you say the speaker's name early on. So I'm offering you a compromise here. So I'm going to say, let's say I'm introducing Dennis. I might say, Dennis today is going to be speaking to us about blah, blah, blah. And then as I finish up my introduction of Dennis, I'll say, now let's welcome Dennis and have him come up. So that way Dennis knows he's being prompted to come up. So when I first say his name, I'm telling him, wake up. And then when I say it the second time, I'm telling him to come up. And I'm really thinking of my friend Randall, who is blind. And Randall, he needs to get cued on his name. So he knows when you say his name that final time, that second time, you're telling him to go ahead and open up his microphone and start talking. So don't save it for last. Use it early and use it late, right at the end. Now, a couple other things. These are just nuances. We're speaking to the audience during an introduction. And then you turn your attention. Let's say Dennis is coming up. So I'm not doing the introduction to Dennis. I'm doing it to you. And then when Dennis comes up, then I can turn my attention to Dennis. And of course, I'm going to lead, if I'm the introducer, I'm going to lead the applause. Of course, we shake hands as we always do. And they even said, I'm telling you, when I leave the lectern, if the speaker's right here and I got to go that way, I never ever cross in front of the speaker. I always cross behind the speaker. Get out of the way and just get out. And once you sit down, you be interested. You show that you are interested in what that speaker has to say. So you're kind of leading the way in interest. These are all good ways to have a proper introduction. And I'm hoping that going forward, we will be able to do this. Now, when the speech is all over, you're not off the hook yet, because let's say you're the Toastmaster of the day, then you want to be able to say something about that speech. And here's 3 points, I guess you could say, something that the speaker had brought up, some other point of entertainment that you thought jumped out at you, or even how it might have helped the entire audience. And then, of course, thank them finally. I think that brings me right down to the end, but I really hope that we'll all start having these great introductions. And then if you don't mind, I'll bring you another one of the Better Speaker series in the future.